All right, here we are. We're live. Welcome back to the Junius Mulby channel. This is going to be one of those more slower paced, relaxing lives. You know, it's the middle of the afternoon. Most of you are either tired, just getting home from work. Depends where you are on the planet. I know a lot of you are in Australia, the UK, Europe. A lot of you might even be up because you can't sleep. Well, I don't blame you. I watched an interesting documentary. It was more of a review. I don't even think it was necessarily that recently made. I came across it today. It was called End of the Road, How Money Became Worthless. I think it's been shared several times online. It's got a lot of the famous names in it. Jim Rickards, Peter Schiff, G. Edward Griffin, the author from The Creature from Jekyll Island. If you're familiar with that book, I've often recommended it here. Mike Maloney is featured in the documentary as well. Again, it's called End of the Road, How Money Became Worthless, if you're interested in looking for it and watching it at some time. But it was kind of a good little, I don't know, we'll be ironic because of the times that we're in. A little shot in the arm, if you will. A little bit of a pun there referring to the vaccinations they're trying to push on everybody. No, but seriously, I was having my coffee, my breakfast, and I was like, why not? I know all of this material. It's the same thing. It's the same thing we talk about every single day here on this channel. What we're facing, what's coming, what's right around the corner. This financial, it's not even a hurricane or a black hole. It truly is a black hole. It's at a universe level. It's the scope of which this is occurring for the first time in history. If you think about it, it's never occurred like this. There's never been a time of 100% unbacked fiat currencies forced into existence and people forced to use them, not backed by anything but the faith, promises, and belief that somehow the government is going to make good on that empty ghost promise. So it brings me to just a little bit more review today. We're going to tie this into some current events, and I've got them pulled up here. So just wait for that for a moment. I've got a kitty behind me trying to bug me. So let me let that kitty out real quick. She's trying to get out. What do you got to do? You got to go out? Go run out. Go do what you got to do. There you go. Kitty's gone. All right. Back to the stories here. So I brought up some stuff because we've been talking about the Fed lately. And there's changes taking place there. One of them I want to talk about real quick. This one. Fed Chair Powell's work with Janet Yellen could determine whether Biden keeps him. I don't really think it matters who's in there at this point. It doesn't matter. They're going to only put puppets in there that are going to do their bidding. You know the saying, company men or a company person. Because Yellen, I don't think she's a man. I don't want to misgender her. But she's a company person. They're only going to use people that are going to do what they want. Okay? So, if you recall, Janet Yellen used to be the Fed chair. Well, now as I've discussed and broke on the channel recently, that they want her to be head of the Treasury now. I don't know how that was never written into law that can't occur or that it's not within our interests as a nation. But apparently it's allowable. So though Biden could opt to replace Fed Chair Jerome Powell when his term expires, some on Wall Street are optimistic he could be set for a second term. The decision is likely to be influenced heavily by how Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen, a former Fed chair herself, gets along with Powell, writes market strategist Komal Srikumar. So we're going to see here the relationship between the Fed and the Treasury has become something that we scrutinize and we look at, and I think there's definitely some shady shit going on. Pardon my French. There is some shady stuff going on, and you know that. You can see it. The whole fact that replacing Jerome Powell, I don't think it matters. Of course, the Board of Governors of the Fed, they give the president a list of names of which he's allowed to choose from. So it's like, yeah, he thinks he has a choice, but does he really? They pick who you get to pick. Again, it's going to be interesting to see what Yellen, what her moves are going to be. Oh my God, with the Treasury. And I'm going to continue here because the main meat of this that I want to get to is right in here. Because there were changes made recently. And what you're going to notice here is we've talked about this, the lack of reserve requirement with the Fed. But let's just check this out, and then we can get back to that other article later. Fed raises its own edifice. This is from Lou Rockwell. In March, the deep state money manipulators brazenly did away with the primary foundation upon which the central bank was erected, and almost no one noticed. Under cover of the COVID-19 panic, Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell and the Fed's board bulldozed its entire rationale, the central argument used to persuade the skeptical American people more than a century ago to allow the establishment of a national bank. Then they shoved this justification over a cliff and into the memory hole below. There is a reason the Fed was named the Federal Reserve System. It was to be called federal to evoke the image and might of the U.S. government. And we all know it's not federal. It was a collection of private banking families. And I know you guys know that because we've discussed it here quite often. It was to be called a system to avoid the term bank because people were wary of banks, shy of them, and rightfully so, and especially national or centralized banks. They didn't like it back then. But the operative word for its function is reserve. Instead of each bank depositing its reserves with another private bank, as they had done, member banks of the new system were all required instead to deposit mandated reserves with the new central bank. This provision was used as a primary selling point for the passage of the Federal Reserve Act in 1913. The argument went along these lines. The central bank would protect against regional panics and against bank runs. Okay? Its national presence and the collective resources of its reserves would make the new system a bulwark against bank failures. They're batting zero on that one, ain't they, boss? Although it gave the banking cartel a monopoly on the creation of money and credit, the people would come to believe that it operated in the public interest. Eventually, the Federal Reserve became the central economic planner of American life. With its passage, the Federal Reserve Act of 1913 created a fractional reserve banking system for the United States. This meant that each member bank was required to maintain a balance on account with the Federal Reserve in an amount representing a fraction of the deposits its customers have made with it. The bank could issue loans to borrowers with the rest of those deposits. In other words, banks made loans in amounts many times greater than the amount of their required reserves. For example, if the reserve ratio is 1 to 10, a bank with $100 million in reserves with the Fed would be empowered to loan out 10 times that amount at $1 billion. Central bankers of earlier eras might have broken out in sweats had they lived to see it. But as the pandemic stay-at-home orders spread and businesses closed their doors in early 2020, the Fed began a program of massive money creation that quickly amounted to an unprecedented $3 trillion. $3 trillion. Accompanying this gusher of liquidity was the Fed's announcement that it this is the big part here, pay attention, it reduced reserve requirement ratios to 0% effective on March 26th, the beginning of the next reserve maintenance period. This action eliminates reserve requirements for thousands of depository institutions and will help to support lending to households and businesses, unquote. That's what they said. Of course, it's always for your own good. It's for your own good. We have to destroy the entire monetary system and banking system for your own good, peasant. You cannot question it, my friends. Don't question it. With that, the Fed's reserve function slipped down the memory hole, just as paper money's function as a claim check for gold was forgotten, and only the paper remained. Now the Fed's primary function disappeared almost unnoticed. Only money printing and credit creation remain. But it makes a certain kind of sense in the endgame of a paper money regime. What is the need to maintain actual money reserves if the Fed can just print whatever it likes to paper over any bank or solvency problems? I mean, think of it. These guys, I mean, it's unprecedented. It truly is. And the only way they're getting away with it is people are just stupid. Nobody sees it. Nobody understands monetary policy, history, banking, economics, supply, demand, gold, the role of gold. I mean, it's truly remarkable. You have to give them credit. I mean, these people really pulled one off. I mean, you know when you watch like a heist movie or a movie about, like The Italian Job or Ocean's 11, you know the movie, the genre. The glorious dashing thieves that have some nefarious plan and conspiracy to commit some awesome heist, and you kind of envision yourself as the protagonist and you're part of it. You want to participate. You find yourself rooting for otherwise what would be considered criminals, right? I mean, this is like, it's the characters are not as attractive. I mean, we have like an overweight albino with the name of Yellen. We've got, looks like a little, kind of like a boyish haircut. You've got a bunch of disgusting old men like Jerome Powell and Mnuchin, most likely, pedophiles and such. You've got a bunch of corrupt and evil and disgusting politicians. They're obviously not Hollywood types, but it really is a remarkable accomplishment. I mean, it took them a long time to do it. I mean, it took them the better part or more of a century, but they really have been able to line their pockets. They really have been able to rob the treasury right out from the nose of everybody. And everybody was so consumed with their own hedonistic endeavors and pleasures, and they just didn't care. That's how fat and stupid and apathetic the population truly was and is. I mean, it truly is over. I'm going to be honest with you. I'm going to call it how it is. And it might sound negative. It might even sound like the cup is half empty. I'm going to tell you this: the cup is empty, and there is absolutely nothing that can be done. There is no hope. It cannot be righted. The wrong is too much. There is nothing that can right this, nothing that can correct this or pull out of it. There is only one outcome, and that is the end of this entire system, and it's going to be catastrophic. It is going to consume a large amount of wealth. There's going to be real, on the ground, visible, palpable, real-world suffering at the level of the household, orphans, widows, children. People around the world are going to suffer as all of the fiat currencies collapse somewhat simultaneously. It's going to be a very, very dramatic event. It's funny because you have these people running around fear-mongering about this 0.003% fatality rate cough, this cold, this virus, the plague that we all heard about this year, right? I mean, you understand, hopefully, I can't address this if you're one of those fear-mongers who's psychotic and believes that it's like this incredible death rate when it's really not. I mean, I've known many people now who have had it. I have not known a single person that has perished from it. And I know there are some that have, but again, I'm not going to get into we're just going to go with the real science here, which is 0.003% fatality on average. So very, very low. The fear-mongering surrounding that is pretty pathetic. I mean, if people realized, if society, if the news, if your average idiot, your every average zombie, the people staggering down the street, who watch their reality TV shows and their sporting events. Those people, if they could grasp for a moment the gravity and the consequence of what is coming as a result of this situation, it would be incredible. I think the panic, well, didn't Henry Ford say it? If people knew the way the economy or the money, I forget the exact quote, one of you could look it up for me. He said there'd be a revolution in the streets tomorrow. Basically, if they understood the way money and the system worked, it's incredible. It truly is incredible. Now, I was on a roll there. I'm just getting a little, I know I'm getting a little bit too upset here. It's the way it is. You know how it is on this channel. Monetary and credit policy, the Fed's historic lending facilities. Let's see. The emergency provisions. Again, these people don't care. They don't care. They don't care. And the average inflation target, do you remember we've discussed this? They've been saying it was 2%. You know, we're finding out now it's much greater than 2%. I mean, we know that to be true. In reading certain materials recently, there's people that believe it's as high as 8 or 9%. If you look at the actual goods and services and what the true inflation rate, if you use the numbers that they used to use back during like the Carter administration, it's a lot higher now than what they're letting you on to believe that it is. But again, they're working things out. These people, they are definitely conspiring to loot the treasury, and they're doing a damn good job of it. Now, I pulled up this article. Let's go back to the Archaic Barbershop. We've seen them corrupt the system. It's almost ridiculous to even have to ask this question, but I thought this was an entertainment article. This is one of those fun reads, you know, kind of tells you the obvious. We can get back to slamming the Fed in a minute. You know, obviously the Fed's not federal. They have no reserves. They're going broke. And again, I've shared with you what I believe the end game is, the outcome here, which is no hope. There's no way to correct this. I mean, unless you guys see something that I don't see, there is nothing. I mean, honestly, look at the numbers, look at the math. Nothing can be done. And I do believe, yes, metals have been artificially suppressed for a long time to make the currencies look healthier. I believe banks are doing whatever they can, or the elite, to take positions in those metals. But ultimately, the outcome of this is going to be an explosive, an incredible panic, an incredible shakedown, and a disaster that I think is of such a historical level. I mean, one for the history books. You know that saying goes, one for the history books. You know, when you take a book out of like world history, obviously they can't put everything in there. You know, they don't put every little blip and detail and disruption that took place. It's impossible. They're going to overlook certain things, but I can tell you one thing. This will make the history books, what we're going into and what we see. And it'll be the kind of thing that it involves a lot of chapters, and people will have to study for some time. I'm going to pause for a minute and just take a look at the comment section, see what we got going. Henry Ford said that, but people eat every... I don't understand what you guys are talking about. Something in the comment section. I was just checking on your comments, seeing what Bill Spencer, Bitcoin Knights Templar, and Rolf, and Human, and all of you were discussing. So pardon me as I take a moment. I'll let you guys entertain yourselves in the comments. It looks like you guys are having a good rowdy time. All right, why is gold considered valuable even today? I can answer you that question because the entire system's collapsing, and gold is the only thing that has historically held value for 10,000 years. And ultimately, as I was telling a friend earlier today, gold has, and I'm not exaggerating here, it has its own ability. You don't have to worry about it. It's almost as if it knows. Humans will gravitate back to it when the time is necessary. It's like it's always there. It almost laughs quietly with the glitter in its yellow eye. It just patiently waits for humans to come back because it knows ultimately, even though governments and institutions and banks and kings and emperors and presidents and legislatures, even though they stray from it and try to create alchemy with paper currencies, even though they try to print and create money out of thin air and make their own gold essentially, they always fail. As you know, fiat has a track record of failing 100% of the time. Fiat always dies. It always has, it always will. And gold always survives and always comes back. So that's why gold is considered valuable today, because it always has been and always will be. Nothing has changed. Everyone thinks they're smarter than the last guy. Every emperor, every king, every president, every Congress, everybody thinks that they have the ability to change things and make things better the next time. Well, that's just not the way it is. That's not the case. It's impossible. And gold knows that, even though it's inanimate, even though it's just the archaic and barbarous relic. But I thought we could read through this little article here. Just if it gets too long, we'll stop. But it's a pretty entertaining read. Few metals throughout history can boast the same desirability as gold. It has served as a hard currency for virtually every civilization that had access to it, fueled exploration and exploitation, and directly underpinned the dominant economic policy, mercantilism, for at least 2 centuries. It is, by and large, one of the most valuable and impactful metals humanity has ever used, despite it being quite soft and very shiny. So what exactly made gold so valuable and expensive, and why did various peoples show such interest in beating it into coins? Surprisingly, it's not so much the properties that gold has, it's what other elements don't have. The fact that it's pretty and shiny also helps too. So let's get into it. And if you remember, we read the article once years ago on this channel about Alan Greenspan, former Fed chairman. It's called the 1966 paper or letter on gold. He wrote a paper, and we've also discussed again Karl Marx, his views on gold and why gold served as money. And ultimately, it doesn't matter what part of the political spectrum you fall on, all of them recognize and realize the same properties, that gold truly has been, always will be, and man, it is. It has every single attribute of being the ideal form as a unit of exchange, an extinguisher of debt, as money. It just does. Most transactions today involve either a swap of pieces of paper or plastic, or moving some virtual bits from one account to another. It's quite a fast and convenient way of buying and selling. On the surface, it's a very simple process. You give me what I want, and I give you these colorful squares in exchange. Then we both ride off into the sunset. But if we delve a bit deeper, this transaction is only made possible by a huge and unseen net of systems and institutions working in concert. For starters, both parties in our hypothetical transaction recognize that the currency involved is desirable and holds value. This is guaranteed by the governments that be. Secondly, money is easy to carry around, portability, either physically in our pocket or on a card, and to count. Thirdly, we know through various means that the money swapping hands isn't fake. It has validity, that it is finite, often limited, resource scarcity, and that it won't rot over time, longevity. Finally, we both know that touching the money won't kill us, that it's safe. So those are the major attributes. We've discussed these at length, again, outlined by economists over time and time again. Ultimately, and I would even add to that simplicity of use, simplicity of understanding across, and it doesn't require and this is what you're going to see where I'm going with this here. This is one of the strong points that gold has over, let's say, cryptocurrencies. One of my biggest criticisms of cryptocurrency over time has been the complexity and the learning curve to understand how it functions, works, to exchange it. When it comes to addresses, tags, QR codes, keychains, blockchain, all the terms, the technologies surrounding it, the security features required, two-factor authentication, seed codes, all of the way to handle accounts, the sending and receiving of it. There is a complexity and a technological learning curve that takes place with cryptocurrency. Whereas you can have the IQ of a salad and pretty much identify the value in money, physical money like gold, in an exchange. You can have a slow person that has something of value that wants to enter a transaction with. Let's say they want to sell them some goods that they possess, or they run a shop and they're not particularly that bright. They can figure out how to exchange for gold and gold certificates and such, where it might be a little more difficult to exchange on the crypto side. But that is being simplified, streamlined, and changing over time. I recognize that. I know that there is leaps and bounds being made there. But let's continue on here. And this is just a little pep talk for gold for all of us here. Ultimately, what you want is in a coin is for it to be small but dense repository of value. So you can carry a lot of purchasing power easily, long-lasting, so you can store it and it won't just waste away distinctive. So it's easy to tell that it's the real deal. In limited supply, to some extent, either through a natural or policy constraints, and safe to handle. And we've talked about over the time, again, gold is so valuable, so dense with how much value it holds. Oftentimes, many civilizations and societies didn't see a lot of circulation of the gold. It would go from vault to vault. There would be paper contracts and promises made, but it was usually held very securely. The whole idea of people, you read it all the time by the idiots. I don't want to live in a society where people got to carry a wheelbarrow around of gold to go to the grocery store. It's like, look, idiot. I can tell ultimately already by your understanding of gold that no one in a multi-generational span of your lineage has ever had to deal with the trouble of a wheelbarrow full of gold. Most likely your family very seldom even held large quantities of silver during those exchange times. I mean, if you look at the history of gold as money in all societies and empires dating back even pre-Rome, very seldom would the majority of the population be exposed to gold. I would even say today, and this will show you real quick. I've thought of this in the past. I don't even think I've ever mentioned this. This is going to be a pearl that's inserted into this video that I'll never remember how to find it. But this is a true observation I've made over time. I believe that in today's era, at this timeline in history, you and myself and we, as humans, in the strata of class that we exist in, have more opportunity and more ability to acquire gold in fairly good quantities than at any other time in history. And I'm not I'm being dead serious right now. And I think it's going to be a fleeting moment. I think what it is it's a combination of factors. It is the inflationary efforts of stimulus and mass printing and of a fake economy that are coinciding with the simultaneous suppression of precious metals valuations by the elites, by these banks, by Wall Street. And what it does is it presents itself an opportunity for the masses, you and me, the people, because I can tell you right now, I am not in some economic strata that you would think. I'm just a regular guy. I'm like you. I'm a blue-collar Joe. I'm a Joe Six-Pack, or whatever you want to call it. But having the opportunity to acquire quarter, half, and full ounce gold coins and purchase these, even at the prices we see now, and put them away and save them, is quite significant. When you look at other times in history where it was very rare and the cost of life itself and the toil and the work required did not generate that type of at times excess to where you could have gold put away in savings or have some gold or even acquire any gold. It was that scarce or difficult. I mean, if you've gone back and watched the videos on this channel of different, in the history tab, I know we've covered England, the currency purchasing power back then, what different coins in the British Empire could buy, what you would paid, and what goods would cost. It was very seldom that a person in London or anywhere in England during the 17th and 18th century would have access to a gold sovereign or ever even hold one or see one. I would say the biggest consolidated wealth in a coin most of those people would ever see or handle would be, like, for example, maybe a crown or a half crown. But to see a sovereign, which was represented by 4 crown, very difficult, very rare. And that's why, again, a lot of those gold coins are still in remarkable condition because they were either vaulted or transacted with very little. Nobody in the general, if you see a picture of London during, let's just a random date here, let's throw out like 1840, 1850, 1860. If you saw, let's say, a lithograph or a black and white of an image that existed and it's a snapshot in time. And I know photography didn't exist during some of those decades I mentioned, but let's pretend you have a snapshot of time and you're looking at a crowded street in London, the years 40 through 60, somewhere in there. You see 500 people lining the sides of the street, walking, bustling, shopping. Some are in carriages, coming and going from stores. Out of those 500 people that you're viewing on that street, you could almost be assured less than 5 of them maybe had a gold sovereign in their pocket at the time. Most of them had shillings, some pence, maybe a half a crown, some of the well-to-do people, or a crown here and there. Of course, checks and papers could be offered as far as exchange, but the banks held most of the gold, and most people did not walk around carrying a significant amount of wealth. Because, again, I have to address that because it comes up all too often. And it's very important as far as when you talk about the consolidation of wealth in gold, how dense it really is, how much wealth and purchasing power just a small amount of gold contains. So hopefully I'm not losing you with that massive digression there that we just went on to. And this brings us neatly to gold. Oh, that was a roundabout way. We got there. We finally got to that. I knew I was going to go off on this article, so I hope you're enjoying it. This brings us neatly to gold. There are around 118 elements on the periodic table, most of them natural, some of them only seen in the lab for fractions of a second at a time. Not many of them are usable for coinage, because not many of them share in those traits listed above. We'll look at each one of the properties above to understand why certain elements just don't work as money. However, we'll leave value out of it for now, as it's a very complex concept that we should look at in a later article. Here, this is a nice picture of some gold. Gold's chemical resilience, aesthetic properties, and association with wealth made it highly sought after for jewelry all throughout history. And again, we talked about portability earlier. And yes, it's quite portable. Quite portable. Elements that are gaseous or liquid at room temperature just don't make for very convenient money. That's quite obvious, am I right? They're not very portable, as you need a vessel to carry them in. This is why people don't carry around barrels of oil and such. Such vessels, which again, Dave Ramsey doesn't comprehend that. Remember, he talked about barrels of oil once when he was relating it to gold, saying they're just a commodity. They're just both a commodity. That's why people don't hold barrels of oil. Shut up, dude. You're making yourself look stupid. Such vessels can break, in which case your life savings might easily go poof, or it could catch on fire, or literally go down the drain, or rot, or decompose. There's a lot of things that can happen. I mean, I don't know if any people who want to hold liquids. And again, liquid, I know oil is not an element, but again, it's a commodity that's a liquid, but it's just another example. Around 13 chemical elements take the form of a gas: nitrogen, oxygen, the halogen groups. And obviously you can't have a gas as an element that we're going to exchange with each other. Am I right? Bromine and mercury natively. So we can cross these off the list immediately, right? I don't think any of you thought that you would ever consider using a gas or a liquid as money. Denominations could also be a bit hard to pull off with fluid currencies. Let's say that units. So again, let's write those off. I'm going to get ahead because there's no reason to even discuss that. Finally, all materials react to changes in temperature and pressure, but fluids react the most. As with any currency, it would probably require special storage and conditions to avoid physical damage to the containers. And this is, again, just talking about elements here, not even other liquids. Carrying coins in your person over long distances would be much more difficult in this case. Changes in temperatures. Okay, in regards to validity, gold has the benefit of being, well, golden. It's the only elemental metal bearing this color, which means that it's quite hard to fake. I know there's iron pyrite, which can kind of fake it a little bit. Alloys and minerals like bronze, brass, and pyrite can pass for it to an extent, but other properties can be used to check whether a coin is made of gold or not. Absolutely. Pure gold is often very soft for a metal, so much so that people used to bite coins to check for gold. Human teeth enamel has a Mohs hardness of 5, while gold has only 2.5. So your teeth can actually put a dent into a piece of gold, but not in a gold-plated coin. So all of you can take your gold out and start biting it if you wish. Most other metals in the periodic table, with some noteworthy exceptions, such as copper, are silvery gray in appearance, so they can, to an extent, be substituted for one another in a coin. I've often mentioned how, palladium, platinum, and silver, they all look fairly identical almost in color. They're very similar anyways. Its longevity is the product of gold's very, very limited chemical reactivity. Noble metals and noble gases aren't called noble because they're expensive, although they are. They're called that because, like nobles of old, they don't mingle with the great masses. Chemically speaking, even runner-ups, silver and copper, get degraded over time. You've seen that. Silver tarnishes, even under the ocean. It almost gets destroyed when you look at shipwrecks. Silver tarnishes due to reactions with sulfur compounds in our sweat and other sources, and copper develops patina due to oxygen. Gold doesn't rust. It does not tarnish, and it doesn't get splotches on it because gold will react with almost nothing. Again, one of the major superior parts of gold versus silver. I mean, you've seen silver change color and essentially degrade over time. It doesn't get degraded by virtually any acid or bacteria, this is gold again, or alkaline solution. To sum it up, there's not much that you can do to damage gold short of throwing it into some king's water, aqua regia, which is a mixture of several strong acids. Scarcity and safety are pretty straightforward. Gold is very rare, so people can't get the raw materials to make their own coins and ruin the economy, obviously. Because it's so chemically inert, touching gold won't kill you. You can even swallow some up and still be okay. As fancy pastry shops are happy to remind you, for comparison, think of sodium, which literally explodes on contact with water. An ideal mix of qualities and faults. So far, so good. But we've yet to answer why gold. Sure, it's portable and distinctive, but arguably so is copper. Mercury is very distinctive, even if harder to carry around safely, and lead is very dense, even if somewhat silvery. Carbon is safe to handle. Platinum or uranium is much rarer. So what gives? Well, here we get to the meat of it. Gold and silver, to an extent, is uniquely suited to making coins because it has the right proportions of each trait for the time it was used. It's rare, but not impossible to find and extract. It is supremely long-lasting and safe, easy to verify and carry, easy to work into sanctioned shapes, coins. Is uranium rare? Probably. I don't know very many people would want to carry that around. But it's so rare that we simply didn't even know it existed for the longest time. And it will probably slowly kill you, which is not ideal. Absolutely, you'd be exposed to radiation that would destroy an entire population. Platinum is just as, if not less reactive than gold, but it's way scarcer on Earth and requires much, much higher temperatures. Read Advanced Tech and Know-How to extract and process. Yeah, quite difficult. Carbon is just as safe, but it's lying around quite literally everywhere, so it's worthless as coinage, and so on. Gold imposed itself because it had just the right amount of each of these traits to make it an attractive option. It's really pretty to look at and shiny, which can only help, as does gold softness, allowing for official state-guaranteed coins to be minted with the proper markings. Silver and copper have established themselves as the runner-up metals for coinage throughout history, and they share some of the properties of gold, but not enough to put them on equal footing. Silver degrades somewhat and is much less distinctive, while copper degrades and is too abundant to properly controlled by authorities. That's why they actually, if you look back at the history of all of this, even the U.S. Coinage Acts, they had to pass limitations. There was actually laws put in place on how many pennies could be minted. I don't know if you knew that. There was actually a minting cap of pennies because they didn't want to cause inflation and devalue the currency because of a flood of pennies. Because back then, as you know, pennies did have pretty much a lot more purchasing power than today. I mean, you could actually get a lot of goods for a penny back in the day because, again, the dollar was so much more valuable. It only took $20 at that time to purchase an ounce of gold. So that you can imagine, at the time, a penny, and this is why they didn't want to create some type of balance shift. It would take $100 pennies to buy a dollar, right? That's what the penny was back in the day. But if you had $20 to an ounce of gold, that would mean 2,000 pennies could purchase an ounce of gold. So if you think about it, they didn't want to see a large influx of pennies and then people cashing those in somehow and trading them in for gold and creating some type of a gold run because of the pennies back in the day. If that makes any sense, that is why I believe they passed those laws, those minting cap laws on pennies during the first coinage acts and such in the United States. It was to prevent inflation, the very things that they celebrate today. Anyway, let's continue on. Still, as history has shown, gold is a workable but not ideal medium for an economy. It's durable and rare enough to be used as a placeholder for value, but there's only a limited amount of gold. It's practically accessible to humanity on Earth. That is practically accessible, yes, and that's limited now. It's been almost entirely mined, I believe. Things will go swimmingly while your economy is small, but eventually you mine all the gold out, and after that you can't make more money to accommodate demand. Well, you just increase the value. But that's one of the arguments I've heard, and I know this is a very debated part of economics, is the value would then increase, you would get deflation, prices would drop, and the economy, it says here, would grind to a halt, and then there's riots, and that's not good. Well, I don't believe that. It can go either way. You can also have massive inflation, the prices go up, the economy grinds to a halt, and then there's riots, and that's not good. You see that right here? It can go either way. And there have been deflationary times that were not a problem in history. There were times where the deflation occurred, and it didn't cause a major disruption of the problem. The opposite of that is what we're getting now, which is inflation. The reverse of the coin is that you can also have too much gold. We'll see about that. It's a real problem, I assure you, as Spain can attest. After discovering the Americas, Spain set to work becoming ridiculously rich in the 15th and 16th centuries through a combination of exploiting the locals and treasure fleets. These were not named in jest. They were, to the fullest extent of the word, fleets of ships, all laden with treasures, all coming to Spain. A single galleon might carry 2 million pesos. 1 peso was 25 grams of silver. The modern approximate value of the estimated 4 billion pesos produced during the 300-year period would come to around $530 billion, or 470 billion euro, based on silver bullion prices of May 2015. And there's a link for Wikipedia explaining these fleets. Let's continue on. Part of these treasures were goods including spices, lumber, skins, and all manner of nice exotic things from the Americas, but a large part was represented by silver and gold mined for cheap. We've covered this on the Spanish mining in silver and the Potosi mines, the 8 reals coin, the Spanish pieces of 8. You're all familiar with that, and how much silver came out of South America. Europe's economies at the time were still using gold and silver to an extent as their standard currency. This means that prices all over the continent were directly determined by how much each country had in store. Mercantilism, the idea that a country becomes richer by exporting more than it imports and gaining gold and silver from its partners, would form out of this relationship. Here's a beautiful piece of gold. This gold piece, recovered from a treasure fleet sunk in 1715, showcases just how resilient gold is against chemical damage, even underwater. What a beautiful gold. That's probably a doubloon, I'm guessing. I know there's various gold currencies, and I don't know them. I don't have them memorized, the Spanish gold pieces, but gorgeous coin. But when you have a metal underpinning your currency, keeping a balance between how much of it you hoard and how productive your economy is becomes vital. Of course, no economy is perfect. No economy is perfect. But again, look what they're doing now. I mean, how are they balancing it now? To give you an idea just how important this relationship is, know that Spain quickly became one of the, if not the richest country in Europe at the time. It had so much money by the end of it that the Spanish crown had been throwing it away with both arms for almost 2 centuries, paying off their national debt, funding religious wars or naval wars with England, colonization of other continents, expensive building projects, fine imports, and they still couldn't spend it fast enough. Spain saw massive levels of inflation by the 17th century, to such an incredible extent that the crown had declared bankruptcy. They were the first royal rulers to ever do so, repeatedly, and there is cause to believe that these levels of high inflation affected the rest of Europe, at least Western Europe. It had so much gold relative to goods and services in its economy that it wasn't really scarce anymore. Coins lost value, prices went right up, the economy stalled because nobody could afford to buy anything and merchants couldn't lower prices without incurring a loss. Then the economy ground to a halt and there were riots again. Not good. A word of ending. Gold is, to this day, as a solid repository of value. It's seen as a solid repository of value. But the inability to control its supply, to either increase or decrease it when needed, shackled governments and rulers in regards to their fiscal policy. And rightfully so. Yes, governments need to be shackled, because if not, they're maniacal and insane, and they will destroy a currency. Once you link your coinage to gold and silver, your economy is at the mercy of how much of them is available in your area. And this is where I disagree. This is where the propaganda gets inserted, or the confusion. It's like these people, they don't get it. Again, once you link, it's like they would rather trust in mankind and the failed policies of central bankers than what was proven and what works when managed properly and more stable and more calm. In olden golden time, this wasn't much of an issue. Economies were pretty small, local things, and it gets into the entire. Things are different now. Things are bigger now, of course, and then they justify why we need to look at alternatives to gold. Again, at the very end, though, it closes out. We'll just read the last paragraph. Gold's properties made it ideal for the minting of coins. Hope you gain a better understanding of what makes a good coin. And, anyway, wealth, status, power. A little bit of a hit piece there at the end. But I hope you understand. Again, it gets back to the same old thing we always talk about. It's ideological. It's an ideological battle on whether or not gold should serve in an economy. I mean, we've obviously read that the longevity, scarcity, portability, and all the facts, all the things that make up the attributes of gold make it ideal. They make it ideal. So why not just let it go? I mean, there's a way to do this. There's a way to make it work. There's a way to make this function again. Obviously, what's happening now, this system, the Fed with no reserves, not federal, these relations of Powell and Yellen and these people, this fiat banking empire, it doesn't work. It doesn't work. And I'm telling you, like I told you earlier when I opened the video, the piece that I watched this morning over morning coffee, over my breakfast, that documentary that I shared with all of you, it's important. End of the road, how money became worthless. It's a good summary. It's a good summary. But again, things are changing, my friends. Take advantage. Take advantage of just having the ability to acquire metals at these times. Again, I'm not a financial advisor. I'm not an expert. I don't even have the title of economist. I don't even want it. I actually wouldn't want it. I can't imagine people pay to go get that title someplace. To me, it's a derogatory title. I would not want to have that on a piece of paper next to my name. But I can tell you one thing. When we read history together here, when we look at the what's going on in the world, and we talk about it, it's pretty obvious. It makes sense, doesn't it? I mean, it makes sense what we're seeing take place. I think all of you understand the direction that we're heading in, and you understand where this is likely to end up. So, that being said, I guess we'll be done with today's extemporaneous ramblings and diatribes here on the Junius Maltby channel. Appreciate all of you for tuning in. Thanks for being part of the channel. As Bitcoin's Knights Templar says, back up the truck. Back up the truck. Absolutely. Get ready to load up. Gold's down, it looks like 1.6% right now, down $30, 1838. Still pretty good for the year, though. Again, you look at let's zoom way out. I mean, look at where we've come from. When you zoom out, look at that. Can you guys see that really well? Okay. Here's 2017. We're about $1,115 down here. Look at this overall rise here. I mean, look at this dip here we had. We went from 1,700 all the way down to 1,449 back in March, and then here we go. Look at this up here in the tooth. So this is not this is a very small. I mean, you can see this type of correction even occurring over here. Look back over here, 2018. Look up here. So it's not that big a deal. It looks like it is here, but when you zoom out, it's nothing. Take advantage of it. Take advantage of it. You look at the percentages, we're still 23% on the year, 10.7 average. Yeah. Gold's solid. It's money. And you know it. You know it. I know it. That's why you're here. All right. Well, all of you have a good night. Good rest of your day. And thanks for tuning in. Thanks for being part of today's broadcast. It was fun. Fun while it lasted. Mrs. Maltby gives you her best. She's taking a nap. She's pretty tired. She had to work this morning, get up early and work. She's a hard-working little sick girl. And God bless her. God bless her little heart. But yeah, appreciate all of you tuning in. And you guys, good night to you all.